Hey, it's Chris, Liege Games. Let's talk board game news and notables for this week. First up, going right into it, breaking news, edited in just for your incitement. Primal the Awakening has just announced that they are launching their Kickstarter campaign on January 19, less than 2 weeks away. Buckle up, kiddos. It's going to be a heck of a ride. Prepare your mouths for the fire hydrant. Now, back to your regularly scheduled news. If you weren't aware, The Crew, A Quest for Planet 9, won the Kennerspiel of 2020. Why am I talking about The Crew? Obviously, it was a great game. It's on a lot of people's lists for 2020. But sort of hidden in the year end of 2020 was the fact that they have announced a sequel to The Crew, an underwater sequel. Personally, with the price point, the gameplay, and just how fun it is, I'm all about that. Now, there's not a whole lot of other detail out there, except for the fact that, again, it's going to be very similar in terms of structure. You're going to have your 3 to 5 player trick-taking, quest-style, advancing missions and challenges type of format. Now, the question is, what twists and what other challenges are there going to be? Can they do to set it apart to make it more than just a re-theming or a reskinning of The Crew in space? Again, there's going to be a 2-player variant. I know a lot of people kind of, weren't a big fan of the fact that you really need 3 to 5, but I think it's okay. And if they can be as creative with the second one as they were with the first one, I'm all in already. It's going to come to retail. The question is just when. If you hadn't heard, it's kind of, again, lurking within the last couple days, last week or so, there has been an announcement that the hit mobile game Slay the Spire, where you are an adventurer, card crafting, deck building, exploring, hit, is going to be doing a Kickstarter sometime in 2021. Now, what is this game? Just what I mentioned. It's fusing roguelike games and card style driven games and fusing them together to make a creative, intuitive, very unique deck building experience. The Spire is the place where you're fighting, and the difference in this game is that it takes the layout, it changes the approach, it changes the levels, it changes the bosses you might even fight on your way to the top to win the game. Now, where does the challenge lie in this game, and why should you be excited? Honestly, it's one of the best rated games, especially for board game-esque people, and even that's come out on a mobile platform recently. It's that well thought of. And that's not just me saying it. That is the host of other people that are taking it. It's also now even on Nintendo Switch. The question mark is there is card crafting. There is relics that affect things in your deck. How are those elements going to be incorporated, and can they? We have seen card creation from AEG and things like Mystic Veil. How is that going to translate, or is it going to be able to be translated? So that's the big question mark. I think all of the other elements I mentioned are easily incorporated, but the crafting and the creation of a deck that is ever changing and evolving as you travel through an experience or a dungeon, that is where the real twist in a very positive way comes in. How do you do that, and how do you make that so engaging and delightful that it is in the video game in the first place? That's why it should be on your radar. The next big piece of news that I saw sort of lurking in the corners of social media is that it appears that several fan favorite games are going to be coming out with new editions sometime later in the year. Again, no definitive dates, but there have been some teaser images floating around for 2 such games. The first one needs no introduction. It's Carcassonne. It's the 20th year anniversary edition of Carcassonne. What's going to come with that? How is it going to set itself apart? Is it just going to be fancy? Is it just going to be super high quality? No one knows. But there's a teaser image going around on that. The second one, not to my personal taste, but I know that this has been sort of a grail game for a number of people, is Russian Railroads. There apparently, supposedly, is going to be an ultimate or a possibly big box version of Russian Railroads to incorporate the base game with 2 expansions. Russian Railroad people, That game is really highly thought of on the Euro style mechanism side of things. And it's out of print. It's hard to obtain. People are paying like twice the value of the game easily just for the base game. So how does this big box compare? Or if you've got a copy you've been looking to get rid of, you might want to start looking to sell it now and not after the formal announcement when the price may go down. Sort of like what happened with Bruges. Sort of like when Hamburg and Amsterdam were announced by Queen Games. All of a sudden, the price and the market for Bruges didn't bottom out by any means, but these copies of Bruges that you were only able to get for like $100 or $120, all of a sudden you have people selling Bruges for $40 or $50 because that's all they could get. Now those are still getting snatched up because of concerns of differences, and so the question remains, in a bigger box game or even an Ultimate Edition, how much of that original gameplay is going to be different? How much of it is going to be the same? How is the art going to be affected? You know, a first edition versus a second edition. If you look at a game like Enos, where some people prefer one vastly over the other, all of those things will have influence on the market. But it's something you should be aware of if you were on the fence, either on the buying side or on the selling side in the next coming months. Another game that sort of initially got a lot of hype, but sort of flew under the radar then, more as a kids style story adventure dungeon crawl, was Stuffed Fables. Stuffed Fables from Plaid Hat Games has just announced that there's going to be an expansion through Z-Man Games titled Oh Brother. If you're not familiar with Stuffed Fables, it sounds exactly like it's titled. You are stuffies, or stuffed animals essentially, trying to save your child from an evil mastermind by doing things that toys would do, sort of like a little bit of fantasy spin on Toy Story, if you will. They talk about new challenges, new enemies, more of the same stuff that made Stuffed Fables relatively well thought of in the first place. And if you're playing with your family, they talk about the lessons that you can use to teach your kids things. And there's probably not enough of that out there to begin with, you know, especially in the board gaming scene. You see it all the time with books, but it really hasn't fallen into the tabletop. And so it's nice to be able to play a game, but also to have a game that relates a message to kids as well. That's not just death, death, kill, kill. They also make it clear for playable purposes that you don't have to have completed the full base game to be able to play the expansion, but you do need the base game to play the expansion because there are some components that you're just going to have. This is a little bit of a different topic. It's a little bit of a rant at the same time, but I mentioned in one of my previous videos that my kids all of a sudden got into Pokemon, the card game. And so I picked him up the Battle Arena, and we've just been playing through. It's got 3 decks that we've sort of a little customized now. And so I just went online, and Pokemon card prices are ridiculous. Sets that were a couple months ago or even longer are like out of print, out of stock, out of distribution, and they go for like $20 to $30 more or even double the price. God forbid it be from a couple years ago. And we're not talking cards that are, you know, that drastically game changing, you know, sort of like Magic the Gathering does, where the game play is very different. Like there's just some cards that they just don't replay the same abilities. We're talking about some of the same cards with the same abilities in a different style that go for a heck of a lot more. We talk about games that go out of print all the time and the costs increase in terms of trying to buy them. The TCG model is just completely insane comparatively. YouTube, if you search it, there are some big name with millions of followers, and all they do is open these $10,000 worth box of like the original Pokemon cards. The booster box itself costs 5 figures, middle 5 fingers sometimes. They're opening $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 booster boxes of this game. And they're getting millions of views, and so they're basically self-paying, but it's just ridiculous. Am I the only one that thinks that is an element of things? I'm assuming the same thing happens on Magic the Gathering. I've just never been exposed to that like I now have on the Pokemon side of things. Because I was trying to get some boosters or just some booster packs of some of the older sets that I thought would be a little bit easier for the kids to get into. Wrong. So FYI out there, if you're ever thinking of dabbling in it, be aware. Over the New Year's, in case you missed it, Sankokushin also gave a New Year's update for the year of 2021 with a ton of information about the game, more backer insight, more absolutely fantastic art. And so I just wanted to say, if that game is on your radar at all, you should head over there and check it out. If it isn't, or if you haven't had time to check it out, I'm probably just going to do a separate video because there's so much information. And as more information piles up for that game, and I'm so interested in that game in the first place, I'm probably just going to do a dedicated video just for that alone and not have it get mashed in here with the other news. The Taverns of Tiefenthal, where you are upgrading, building your own beer hall, tavern, essentially, with a deck building mechanism that is also modular, comes with 4 modules in the base game, has just announced that they are going to be putting out an expansion sometime coming later in 2021 with 4 or 5 new additional modules. The difference being, with the modules that come with the base game, you can include as many or as few as you want, whereas these modules, apparently from the designer, states that these modules are all going to be independent, meaning you only use one at a time. One of the biggest concerns or criticisms, I think, of that game originally was it felt more like a puzzle that had been solved and very one track once people figured it out, minus maybe having all of the modules in. I have not personally played it. It's always been on sort of my radar of want to play, but not want enough to go out and buy myself personally beforehand. And so maybe these modules then mix it up enough that the strategy becomes that more diverse, sort of what expansions did for Lords of Waterdeep or Champions of Midgard. So it'll be interesting to see how much flavor that adds. Another piece of news is that CMON has now announced that their animation collection campaign of the Looney Tunes, the Teen Titans Go, as well as the Scooby-Doo board games will be launching at 3 p.m. on January the 13th. Quackalope has now put out 3 videos, one for each of these games, and so if you head over to his channel, you can check out the differences, and they are all significantly different. Scooby-Doo, which I previously covered, their gameplay and my thoughts on it seems to be a very competitive team game, whereas Looney Tunes is pure chaos, as you would expect from the IP in general, and then Teen Titans Go is a more head-to-head, objective completing, power asymmetry between the Titans trying to save the city in different ways, trying to be the first one there to do so. Now, all of these games, they have said in the video, are going to be going to retail in some form. It's just a matter of how much Kickstarter exclusive we're going to see in the actual campaign. Is it going to be a la the CMON special, where we have tons and tons and tons? Or is it going to be more reserved like the ones they did with the comic book selections, where there were a certain limited number, 4 or 5 sort of ones that they really focused on, and then that was it, because maybe there was more of a retail focus, or there was just a tighter design in that campaign as a whole. I don't know. We'll see it in just over a week. Okay, so that's it for this week's roundup. Stay tuned this weekend. I will be launching my best games released in 2020. So again, if you're looking for something different, because like I've said before, my tastes are quite different than other people's, you're going to see some games on this list that aren't on anyone else's. So buyer beware, or watcher beware, I guess. Anyway, thanks. 2021 and 2021. Let's do it. Stay classy. See you around.